Morning and welcome to today's webinar, Advocacy 101, Raising Our Voices for Youth Outdoors. My name is Severia and I'm the Communications Manager for Transforming Youth Outdoors, also known as TYO. TYO was created to scale the impact of outdoor youth development and transform the lives of youth by providing best practices, tools, and support to individuals and organizations working with youth. We are a technology platform that enables those in the field of outdoor youth programming to learn, share, network, and build upon your successes. Membership to TYO is free, and you can sign up at mytyo.org. Our webinar series is just one of the many ways that TYO connects you to experts and valuable learning opportunities. Today, it is my pleasure to welcome Jackie Ostfeld with us. In her role as Associate Director for the Sierra Club's outdoor campaigns, Jackie helps direct a broad portfolio of outdoor work, leading organizational efforts to advance policy, advocacy, and partnerships to ensure kids and communities have access to and feel welcomed in our shared public lands and outdoor spaces. Jackie is also the founder and chair of the Outdoor Alliance for Kids, otherwise known as OAK, a national strategic partnership of nearly 100 organizations representing over 60 million individuals, collectively educating and activating decision makers to ensure all children, youth, and families have access to the outdoors. Such awesome and important work. Jackie, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Severia. I am so excited to be here with you all today, and I also want to thank Chris Rutgers and the whole TYO community for letting me talk to you today and share a little bit about what I've learned about advocacy over the years. So for those of you who I don't know, I'm Jackie Ostfeld. I am an advocate for ensuring all kids, all communities have opportunities and access to the outdoors. I was privileged to grow up with opportunities to play and get outdoors. My parents weren't big nature people, but I grew up in a safe neighborhood where playing outdoors was the norm. And I had opportunities through my school to go on field trips where I began to develop my love for nature and the outdoors. When I graduated from college, I began my career in this field as a naturalist, first teaching kids in rural South Carolina and then moving on to the foothills of the Southern Sierras in California, where I had the great honor and privilege to spend 3 years as an outdoor environmental educator teaching thousands and thousands of kids in the outdoors and about the outdoors. I got to see that light bulb go off that I know many of you on this call have seen more times than I can count when a kid was given that opportunity to learn about some complex topic like ecological succession through an outdoor hands-on activity. I also saw rivals, childhood rivals become best friends by having shared time in the outdoors. And I also saw just how many kids that I taught had never had an outdoor experience prior to that moment. And that despite the many incredible programs that are out there, there were still far too many kids not having these experiences. So fast forward 15 years, I now chair the Outdoors Alliance for Kids, or OAK, which is, as Severia mentioned, it's a partnership of nearly 100 organizations, including TYO, that are advocating to ensure that all kids, no matter their background or where they live, have opportunities to experience the natural world outdoors. So I've now been in Washington, D.C. for over a decade, focused on national advocacy and partnerships to get kids and families outdoors. And before I kick off this webinar, I want to just acknowledge that there are multi-day trainings and full college courses on advocacy and lobbying. So when Chris and Severia asked me to do this Advocacy 101, I was like, oh my God, what am I gonna share with these callers in 30 to 40 minutes? So I want to just preface this presentation that I'm really just going to be skimming the surface here, sharing some of the experiences that I've had. And if there's anything I hope to leave you with today, it's that we are all advocates and that there are many methods, there's many tools to raise your voice, either your individual voice or your organization's voice as an advocate. And it's easy and it's fun. So first, I'm just going to get into some real basics. What is advocacy? Advocacy is the act of educating or arguing in favor of something. Any cause. So raising your voice about something you care about, like getting kids outdoors, getting families outdoors, access, inclusion, and equity in the outdoors. Those are all, raising your voice about those topics is advocacy. And to there's some examples of non-lobbying advocacy, which we all can do. So anytime you're just out there educating policymakers, educating the general public about a broad issue, that's non-legislative, non-lobbying advocacy. Encouraging people to register to vote, educating voters about candidate positions, organizing communities, and litigation. There are no restrictions for nonprofits on non-legislative advocacy, so we can all do this with great frequency. And then I want to just talk about the two kinds of lobbying, because lobbying is a type of advocacy, but not all advocacy is lobbying. And I think often when we think about advocacy, we think about this type, which is direct lobbying. Direct lobbying is communicating on a view about legislation to a legislator or their staff. It's plain and simple. Here are some photos that I'm sharing with you from some of Oak Lobby Days in Washington, D.C., where our members spend a day on Capitol Hill lobbying for Oak's top policy and appropriations priorities. I want to just stop here real quick to dispel a myth that nonprofits can't lobby, because I know that that's something I hear a lot in the field. They can, and there are rules. There certainly are rules on how much, and they can certainly get a little bit complicated. And I want to acknowledge that I'm not an expert on IRS or nonprofit law. But for the most part, if your organization signs on to a letter to Congress or participates in a few lobby visits or even an annual lobby day, it is unlikely that you will come anywhere close to reaching that limit. So organizations working on the ground with direct experience getting kids outdoors are some of the most effective advocates and lobbyists. And then the third type that I want to describe briefly, because it's a tool we use a lot, is grassroots lobbying. And it differs from the direct lobbying in that the target of your communication is the general public. So you're asking, you're communicating with the general public that in a way that expresses a view about specific legislation and also includes a call to action. So I'm sharing an example here of a communication from Nolan Gould. I hope you all recognize this kid. He's no longer a kid, he's a teenager, but Nolan Gould is the star of, or one of the stars of ABC's Modern Family, and he's also a Sierra Club Youth Ambassador who has been a really great champion for our cause, our collective cause is to get youth outdoors. So this communication educates the general public, in this case Sierra Club members and subscribers, about a particular topic and piece of legislation, and then asks them to weigh in with their members of Congress about that particular piece of legislation. So we call this an action alert or a take action, and it's one example of grassroots lobbying. So other types would include reaching out through the media, op-eds, LTEs, other ways of expressing an opinion and sharing that with the general public as opposed to directly to the decision maker. So why advocacy? Why does it matter? Isn't Congress broken? Those are all questions I hear sometimes. And the bottom line is that decisions about our lives are made every day in the halls of Capitol Hill here in Washington, D.C., and also in state houses across the country. Those who show up are making those decisions. Many of our groups, I'd probably say most of our groups on this call, do not have a lot of money to hire fancy lobbyists in Washington, but we have people power, and when we collectively make our voices heard, it really does make a big difference. And here's just one of my favorite pictures of America's favorite president telling you to show up. So you might have seen that Congress and the administration just struck a deal to provide some relief after Hurricane Harvey and to keep the government open for 3 more months. So every year Congress must pass a budget to keep the government open. If they can't come to a deal, they often will pass what is called a continuing resolution, or a CR, to continue funding the government at a steady level for some specified amount of time. Sometimes that's weeks, sometimes that's months. So right now Congress has until December 8th to make a deal. Why does this matter? In the White House, earlier this year, the White House released a proposed budget that dramatically reduces discretionary spending. The proposal would eliminate or dramatically reduce funding for programs across the federal government that support getting youth outdoors. I'm sharing with you a sample list of programs across the federal government that support getting kids outdoors. The Blue Sky Funders Forum is out there mapping and tracking some of the philanthropic investments in environmental education and outdoor learning. And their findings have shown that the environmental education grant programs at NOAA and EPA alone comprise the largest source of funding for environmental education in the country. I just want that to sit with you for a moment. If you look at this list of programs, this is really just a sample here, but these are some of the federal dollars that are going to programs that support getting kids outdoors, and it's in the billions. You know, there's programs like at EPA, NOAA, and youth programs at the National Park Service that really directly support getting kids outdoors, outdoor environmental education. And then there's also programs across the federal government that support the infrastructure necessary to ensure that kids and families and communities can get outdoors safely and easily. So, for example, you've probably heard of the Land and Water Conservation Fund. That helps with national land acquisition. It also helps to support outdoor play and recreation projects all across the country. The Community Development Block Grants Program at the Department of Housing and Urban Development supports your local parks with a focus on alleviating poverty. And so all of this, all of the money that goes into getting kids outdoors right now, a big chunk of that money comes from the federal government, and it's all at risk without effective advocacy. So that brings me to equity. I wanted to make sure to talk about this because right now, less than half of all Americans live within walking distance of a park. Plain and simple, there are a ton of barriers. I think everybody on this webinar knows that there are many barriers for kids and families to access the outdoors, whether that's the cost of transportation to get somewhere further away or a lack of close to home safe access to what I like to call nearby nature. Advocacy, particularly policy advocacy, has the potential to close this equity gap in the outdoors to ensure that more resources are being directed to communities that need them the most. And so that's a big reason why we do policy advocacy, is really to make sure that investments are going to places where it is needed. And perhaps most importantly, advocacy works. So I'm going to share very briefly a few examples of major initiatives or policies that are making a big difference for our kids and communities that were the results of effective long-term and coordinated advocacy campaigns. First, the Every Kid in a Park program. I hope you've heard of it. If you haven't, check it out, everykidinapark.gov. It's a federal program launched by President Obama in 2015 to encourage all kids to get outdoors. It's a really simple program. It basically waives fees for fourth graders and their families to visit federally managed lands, waters, and shores. It has been highly leveraged. At least 7 state park systems have adopted the use of the federal pass in their state parks, in both red states and blue states. And at least one state, Nevada, has passed its own legislation inspired by the federal program, which waives entry fees to state parks for 5th graders. And private and philanthropic investment has been pouring in to support the program. So at least in the first 2 years of the program alone, at least $5 million in philanthropic investments have gone into supporting the program, with a big focus on transportation costs for kids from low-income communities. So the establishment of this program was the result of long-term advocacy with the previous administration to take action to ensure that all kids had opportunities to visit public lands. The then upcoming centennial of the National Park Service provided some really great leverage as the administration and the broader community was looking for ways to ensure that the second century of conservation in America was more reflective and welcoming of all communities. I'm going to share a bit more about how we're advocating now to continue this program in the new administration, but first I want to share a state and local success story too. So 2 recent ballot initiatives are expected to bring incredible results for kids at the state and local level. I'm sure you've all heard of this by now, but if not, in November, more than 2/3 of Oregon's voters voted to fund Oregon's Outdoor Education Fund to provide all 6th graders with a residential outdoor learning experience. While the state could use more funding to reach every 6th grader, the community successfully advocated for a $24 million funding allocation to support the program. And this success was the result of years and years of coordinated advocacy work with many, many organizations on the ground. And I just want to give a shout out and a big thanks to the Gray Family Foundation for investment in this critical work in the state of Oregon. I also want to share a county example. Also on the ballot in November 2016 was the LA County Park Measure A, which was an initiative to extend a tax that would raise nearly $100 million annually for cities and local communities across LA County to protect, enhance, and maintain parks. This effort was also supported by coordinated and effective advocacy of many groups on the ground and took several years to gain the votes needed to pass on the ballot. So those are two really incredible successes that were overshadowed by the most recent election. So effective advocacy takes teamwork. All of these successes and many more were the result of incredible coordination, determination, and passion from organizations, businesses, community groups, individuals. It takes a lot of work to move a policy of this scale forward, but the result is incredible. There is a lot more dollars being invested into either the programs. I look at Oregon as kind of the programs, the environmental education programs, or in LA, the infrastructure to make sure that the parks, to make sure that kids and families have opportunities to get outdoors, learn about the outdoors, experience, play, get active in the outdoors. So I'm going to give an example of teamwork. Partnerships matter. I have the great honor and privilege of chairing the Outdoors Alliance for Kids, or OAK. As Severia mentioned earlier, OAK is a national strategic partnership of nearly 100 nonprofits and businesses. Together, we collectively advocate for equitable opportunities for our children, youth, and families to get outdoors. OAK is governed by a passionate and multi-sector steering committee and is open to members interested in using their voices to help advocate for our kids and families. OAK has only been around for 7 years, but we've had some early success as a result of our collaboration. Our first action as a coalition was to call on former First Lady Michelle Obama to establish a Let's Move Outside arm to her childhood obesity campaign. By using our collective voices, first through a letter, but then through a series of meetings with key White House officials, we were able to help develop Let's Move Outside and dramatically raise the national profile of the role of the outdoors in combating childhood obesity. This effort has led to further collaboration on the ground, and one of our founding steering committee members, the YMCA of the USA, is now is leading local Let's Move Outside efforts in 50 cities across the country, bringing together community groups, nonprofits, businesses to look at solutions to make sure that people can get outside in those locations. And the other success I want to talk about today is Every Kid in a Park program, which I know I talked a little bit about it earlier, but partially I want to talk more about it today because partially because it may be under threat in the current administration, and I'd like to use it as an example to share with y'all some of the ways in which we're thinking about advocacy. I told you a little bit about the program a few slides back, but now I want to share what we're doing to ensure that it continues. And please note that the tactics that I'm about to share with you, the strategies that we're looking at, are by no means an exhaustive list of tools and tactics for advocacy, but meant to highlight some of our specific activities and hopefully give you some ideas for your own advocacy. All of these tactics can be used at the state and local levels too. Most of my experience has been at the federal level, but a lot of the strategies and tactics are very similar. So I mentioned earlier, Every Kid in a Park was established in 2015 with broad support from OAK, our members, and the broader community invested in getting kids outdoors. Our initial advocacy for the program was with the administration, which really made it non-legislative C3 activity, C3 advocacy. So the future of the program is uncertain, and we're now pivoting our advocacy efforts to try and save the program for years to come.
Hey, Jackie, if you can hear me, I think we just lost audio on you. Jackie, I'm not sure if you can hear us, but it seems like the audio has gone out. Everybody else on the call, can you raise your hand if you can hear my voice in the chat box? Yep, Jackie, I believe your volume cut out a couple slides ago. Hang on, everybody, as we try to figure out the audio situation. Our apologies.
Hello, can you all hear me?
Yay, there you are.
Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I have no idea what happened. Technology.
No worries, we need to go back a couple slides.
Okay, yeah, please let me know have you seen this one?
So we did not hear you talking about this one. I think you were finishing up on Every Kid in a Park.
Okay, so I'll just say thank you guys for bearing with me. I'm so sorry about that. But basically, Every Kid in a Park, I mentioned it before, the future of the program is a little bit uncertain, and we're now pivoting our advocacy efforts to try to think about how we can save this program for years to come. So what I wanted to do is to share with you all a basic power mapping tool, which I think is helpful in thinking through any kind of advocacy campaign, whether it's policy related or not. First, what do we want to do? And in this case, we want to save the Every Kid in a Park program. And then thinking about who can help us get what we want. So I'm not going to go through this whole exercise with you today, but I want you to know it's a resource and something that you can easily Google how to build a power map. In the case of Every Kid in a Park, there are two targets. One is the administration, particularly Interior Secretary Zinke, since he has the power to simply continue the program. And the second is the Congress, particularly key committees that would have jurisdiction over the Department of the Interior. For example, in the Senate, the Energy and Natural Resources Committee, and in the House, the Natural Resources Committee both have oversight over the Department of the Interior and related agencies. Then we work backwards to figure out how to reach them. So first I'm going to start with the administration. If you haven't met him yet, meet our new Interior Secretary, Ryan Zinke. OAK is reaching out directly to the administration to educate them about the value of the Every Kid in a Park program. The program has a lot of support from staff across the agency, but it's uncertain whether or not Secretary Zinke wants to continue the program. The program just kicked off its third year earlier this month, which is a good sign, but unless we advocate effectively, there is reason to believe that this will be the last year of the program. So we're meeting with staff at Interior to register our support. We also have an organizational sign-on letter to send to Secretary Zinke later this month, registering broad support for the program and asking him to continue it for years to come. And I'll just pause to say that that letter is open to any nonprofit or business that would like to sign on. And if you're interested in seeing it, you can contact me. But we're also looking at who are the groups that might be able best to reach him. We know that Secretary Zinke is a sportsman and a veteran, and he cares deeply about what those communities think of him. And so we also know that an economic case is particularly important in this administration, and we have allies and friends in the outdoor industry who really share our values in ensuring that kids can connect to the outdoors. So how can we think about elevating those voices in particularly as part of our advocacy strategy? But we're not taking any chances, and we're not putting all of our eggs just in the basket of the administration. And so we're also working directly with Congress to educate them about the value of the program. And here's a photo of some kids from the National Park Trust's Buddy Bison program. They're one of our key partners in the Every Kid in a Park program. And they're meeting with their congressman and minority whip, Steny Hoyer, to tell them about the impact of Every Kid in a Park on their lives. This meeting was purely educational. There was no lobbying activity. They weren't asking for anything, just really a chance to tell the congressman about the program and how it shaped their lives and why they loved it. But we're also working to pass the Every Kid Outdoors Act. And so Every Kid Outdoors Act is a recently introduced bill. It was introduced in July, and it is designed to ensure that the Every Kid in a Park program lives on. We know that getting kids outdoors has broad bipartisan support, and that the introduction of this bill with bipartisan co-sponsors in both chambers of Congress is a really great testament to that. In the Senate, we have Martin Heinrich, Democrat, and Lamar Alexander, Republican, were the original co-sponsors. And in the House, we have Democrat Nikki Tsongas, Congresswoman Tsongas, Representative Scott Tipton, who's a Republican, Representative Diana DeGette, who's a Democrat, and Representative Elise Stefanik, who's a Republican. All of them were original co-sponsors for this legislation. The bill has already received a subcommittee hearing in the Senate Energy, Natural Resources, National Parks Subcommittee, where the National Park Service indicated that there may not be long-term support for the program, and the agency is reviewing this and other youth programs across Interior. Here's a photograph of one of our champs, Martin Heinrich, from that hearing, who was prepared for some potential pushback from the administration and really did a great job of asking tough questions to the witness. Oak and our members are doing direct visits with members of Congress to secure more co-sponsors for the bill. We've submitted written testimony in advance of this hearing. We'll also include this bill on our policy agenda for our annual Advocacy Day in late October. So direct lobbying is something that we are very, very committed to for this and other programs that we care about. I also just want to share about the grassroots lobbying that I mentioned before. We're also activating the Grassroots, and here's an example of an alert that went to Sierra Club members to educate them about the legislation and then ask them to contact their members of Congress to co-sponsor the bill. This alert generated over 20,000 emails to members of Congress in 1 week, and we heard from our congressional sponsors here in Washington, D.C. from their staff that they got a ton of calls following this action alert. So alerts like this are really important tools. They're really easy, and they do matter. You know, getting one call is one thing, but getting dozens and dozens and dozens of calls or emails from a constituent is something that staff pay close attention to on the Hill. They're important tools to reach decision makers and to really also to ensure that your members and the general public have ways to contribute and weigh in on the policies that they care about. Oops, I'm sorry, I moved a little bit. So one thing I want to also share is don't forget I don't understand why you lost me. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. We're good.
Oh, okay. You're here. Okay, it keeps cutting out. I'm not sure if that's something on my end or your end, but I'm sorry, guys. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can still hear you fine.
Yes, you can. Okay. So don't forget to celebrate your champs. Celebrating champs. There is no easier way to advocate than through the use of social media, and particularly Twitter. Every member of Congress has a Twitter account, and their staff monitor it regularly. We celebrated our Every Kid Outdoors Act champs by hosting a Twitter party to talk about and to raise the visibility of the legislation. Many Oak members participated, and this is a really nice way to activate and engage the organizations you work with. And if you're not on Twitter, you need to be. So one of my all-time favorites that I want to share with you is Elevating Youth Voices. This is to target both Secretary Zinke and members of Congress, and just to educate the general public about the value of the Every Kid in a Park program. Oak has an I Love My Every Kid in a Park Past Because postcard campaign going on right now to solicit stories from fourth graders who are in or have gone through the program. We'll plan to deliver these postcards to the appropriate decision maker at the appropriate time, and we could use your help in sharing this postcard campaign with the kids you serve, particularly if they have or intend to participate in the Every Kid in a Park program. Of course, this is a tool for advocacy for other programs and policies as well, but this is an example I want to share with you because it's a lot of fun. It's also C3 non-legislative advocacy because the Every Kid in a Park program is a program that already exists. And so really what we're just doing is learning from kids, seeking testimonials from kids about why they love it. And so far we haven't received any postcards that say that they don't love it, so that's good news. We also have a youth blog series where we're doing video and written interviews with youth who have been through the program to learn more about how they value the program. We're particularly looking for kids in key congressional districts that have oversight over the program, but we're really interested in all youth voices. And we have, I think, 6 or 7 blogs on our website. We just started a month or so ago to really dig in a little bit with some of these young people to learn about the experiences that they've had. Elevating youth voices through blogs and op-eds and LTEs is a great way to engage them civically and also to really demonstrate the impact of our youth outdoors program straight from the source and the kids who are participating in them. And then the other way we're also finding opportunities to elevate youth voices to decision makers directly. The images on the left are of some young, eloquent women who had been through the Every Kid in a Park program, again, due to the excellent program provided by the National Park Trust. On the top left, this young lady is speaking at the White House during last year's Oak Week. And on the bottom left, Evie and Louise are speaking at a congressional briefing attended by staffers on Capitol Hill. In both cases, they're simply sharing the impact of the program on their lives and not making any kind of legislative or lobby ask. And here's my other favorite. Invite decision makers, either members of Congress or the administration or even CEOs of key companies that you're trying to reach. Invite them to your events. There is no better way to understand the impact of a program than to see it firsthand. My very first event when I started working at the Sierra Club with an elected official was when I was back in 2008. We invited Senator Patty Murray to visit an Operation Purple camp out in Washington State. Operation Purple is a program of the National Military Family Association that gives military kids a week-long camp experience. The event was purely educational, but it was a great opportunity for the senator to meet with some of the kids. And Senator Murray is and has been a champion for getting kids outdoors. And events like this help to thank her and to show her that we appreciate her leadership on this topic. More recently, in this picture here is from an Every Kid in a Park event. Oak helped to launch Every Kid in a Park program in Washington, D.C. and we hosted a visibility event to bring more attention to the program. And so here's an event we put on with several Oak members and where we had senior officials from the administration attend. And it's always a great way to not just get visibility for your programs, not just engage decision makers and elevate champs, but also to have really great opportunities to bring your coalition together around something positive. So how can you help? We need you, and there are lots of ways to engage in advocacy depending on whether you are an individual or representing an organization, and also based on what your organization's comfort levels are. But I'm just going to go through a list of some potential ways that you can get involved and help, and I'm not going to go into all the specifics of these, but I am available for questions to speak in more depth about any of these as we get into the Q&A session. But just a couple things to think about. One, reach out to your member of Congress directly. Register your support for the Every Kids Outdoors Act and other important programs across the federal government that support getting youth outdoors. You can do this by setting up a meeting, picking up the phone and making a call, sending an email, or maybe even a more formal letter, or attending a town hall during a congressional resource. Every member of Congress has a website with contact information. It's very easy to find. 2, write an op-ed. Express your views in a public forum. Write an op-ed or a letter to the editor for your local paper. If you can't get it published, consider posting a blog on your website. But express your support for youth outdoors programming and why. Why does this work matter to you? What's the return on investment for getting kids outdoors today? And I just want to mention here that the Children in Nature Network has an incredible research library that can really help you strengthen your case if you do decide to write more on this topic. The third thing, empower the youth that you work with to raise their voices in support of outdoor opportunities for all kids. I shared with you Oak's postcard and youth blog series. Those are resources to you. We'd love for you to get involved, but I also want you to just look at them as ideas, and maybe there's something, a local advocacy effort that you're involved in. Feel free to steal any of these ideas and run with them. The more youth that we can empower to speak about the impacts of the outdoors, the better. And you can also, in addition to the postcards and the blog series, you can also think about, are there youth in your networks that might be wanting, maybe want to write an op-ed or an LTE as well, so you can also elevate their voices in the newspaper. For get on social media. All members of Congress, I think I said this before, but all members of Congress are on Twitter, and it is a great place to communicate with lawmakers and to thank them when they champion our issues. Staff spend all day on Twitter. It is where a lot of staffers get their news, and there's some great Twitter pages or Twitter accounts to follow to make sure that you're staying up on some of the news. But it's just I can't stress enough how important social media is in today's modern advocacy. And also, again, invite decision makers to your events, to visit your programs. You can find the congressional recess calendars online. You know, August was a great time. I know we just passed August. There's a recess, but there's recesses around holidays throughout the year when members of Congress are back in district. They might host a town hall. That's a great place to engage them. But it's also a great opportunity to invite them out to see your programs, and it doesn't have to be a big, fancy event. Members of Congress are really interested in meeting with their constituents. So if you need resources for how to invite a decision maker to an event, I'm happy to help with that too. And if you represent a business or a nonprofit organization, I encourage you to become a member of OAK. Help communicate your support for youth in the outdoors to lawmakers and the administration. Become part of the conversation. Help shape the direction of this advocacy work. And then lastly, I'll say join us in Washington, D.C. for the annual OAK Week. OAK Week is the annual meeting of the Outdoors Alliance for Kids. During the week, we'll have an annual meeting. We'll have a lobby day. And we'll include a lobby day training to get into some of the nuts and bolts of having effective meetings with decision makers or their staff, and we'll spend a day on the Hill. We also have a Youth Every Kid in a Park event to draw attention to the program, and several receptions, including a congressional reception where we'll bestow some OAK Awards on some of our congressional champions. It's a great networking opportunity and a chance to join forces and advocate for the things we care about. And a lot of people who come are new to advocacy, so it is a great place to get your feet wet if this is something that your organization is interested in. I'd love to see you all there, and so I'm sharing contact info with you on this slide if you'd like to reach out. But with that, I'll stop. I really love to spend the rest of the time in a dialogue with you all. If you have questions, I'm here to answer them. And again, I just want to apologize about the technology issues. Hopefully, I'm holding my cord in my phone really tightly right now, so hopefully we won't have any more. But thanks for bearing with me on all that.
Thanks, Jackie. It seems to have been fixed for that, so no worries. Great. We do have a couple questions, and for everyone who is still on the call, feel free to questions in the chat box, and we'll cover some of those. So first question, so this is, there's two questions that are sort of similar, so I'm going to give them to you both. One is, how do I find out about the specific funding opportunities from those from the funding streams that you mentioned? And also, do you recommend a resource to find grants? So those are sort of related in the sense of, you know, what are good resources to find money?
Yeah, that's a great question. So each of the programs that I listed, you know, particularly I think, you know, I'm just trying to think of the ones where I've seen grant opportunities. I know that the EPA's Environmental Education and NOAA's Be Wet, and even programs that don't always register at the federal level, they're not necessarily in the budget, but they exist, like the Forest Service has a More Kids in the Woods program and a Children's Forest program. I would direct you to their websites. I don't know that there's anybody that is aggregating all of that grant information, and that's a great question. I'm curious if anybody is, and if not, that's probably a real important need for the community. But what I will say is that a lot of the federal agencies right now are kind of under a freeze in terms of spending, and you know, in years past, groups have been able to apply for funding, and with the uncertainty with continuation of these programs at the federal level, I don't think there's a lot of money going out the door in the way that there was in the past, and that's the reason that we're trying to advocate to save those budgets. So I think, you know, the short answer is each of their websites have it. You can like Google EPA environmental education grants, and you'll find that information and when the deadlines are and all that information. But I'm a little skeptical that I think the agencies right now are sort of in a wait and see phase, and they're not really sure what their budgets are going to look like. And everybody's been asked to be frugal because they know that these cuts are coming. So sorry, that's probably not the answer you want to hear. But I think that, there's a lot of, funding for this work is a big issue. I know that there's, I don't want to direct people towards specific foundations because I don't know that there's any one or two foundations that are putting a ton of money into this work. I know that there's some companies in the outdoor industry who have done a lot, put a lot of resources into getting kids outdoors. I know REI just wrapped up this Force of Nature RFP process to get women and girls into the outdoors, and the North Face has Planet Explore grants, and I think Keene has something going on right now for small grants. The Blue Sky Funders Forum is a forum of funders that are looking to advance the field of outdoors and environmental education. So that's a new and emerging funders forum philanthropy group to look at. Yeah, that's what I've got for now. I bet there's probably some other people on this call who may have some even better information, and maybe that's something we can share out in a follow-up email.
Yeah, and Jackie, I would add that on TYO we have some resources for grants for the people on the call. We do a webinar every spring with the Outdoor Industry Foundation, and Ivan from their organization shares different opportunities that are coming up, so that can be found on TYO as well. And we also are going to be doing some like kind of grant writing 101 webinars at the beginning of the year in 2018. So
incredible. Great. That's awesome.
So keep it, those on the call, keep an eye out for that. There's a question here. What is the best resource in learning how to start a full school year youth program? We currently only have summer programming, and I'm trying to get an idea of how other organizations might run youth programming throughout the year. So that question's a little bit less advocacy. Annie, Jackie, if you want to take that, feel free. I would say we also on TYO, there's a ton of resources on how to start programs and how to start school-specific programs. So I would definitely look into TYO for that. And Annie, I can reach out to you with those resources after. But Jackie, do you have any ads for school year programming?
No, I think I would have said the same thing, and to refer people to TYO. I think you guys have great resources for programs. So yeah, I'm not sure.
Cool. Great. Let's see. Do you have suggestions about how a small regional organization can find already existing advocacy efforts in their area?
Yes. A couple places to refer you. So I'm curious what the region is, but I do think that there are partner organizations with OAK, I think the Children in Nature Network and the North American Association for Environmental Education are two really great resources because they help to map the movement. NAAEE, for example, I think their website is naaee.org, and they have affiliates across the country who are working on environmental education. And so that's probably a really great place to start. The Children in Nature Network also does some mapping of the movement. I know that there have been, over the years that I've been in this space, there's been local Children in Nature networks that have popped up. I remember the North Carolina Children in Nature Network, for example. And so I think looking to see if there are existing networks is a good start. I don't know if there's one central hub for all of that either, but I know that there's coalitions emerging in California, like the California Outdoor Engagement Coalition, and in Albuquerque there's the MRG3 Coalition. So I think just a little internet work and just kind of looking, at key terms, environmental education, outdoor education in your location. I imagine you'll find some of those groups. If not, I'm happy to help. I may know them offhand. It just depends on the region. But there's definitely a growing movement out there, and there's a lot of people working on this on the ground.
Great, thanks. A couple more questions. What are some of the Twitter or other sources you use to find news or updates on public lands or Every Kid Outdoors Act?
So a couple things. So I don't know that I necessarily use Twitter for my news. I know that staffers do refer to it quite a bit. One of the simplest and most basic tools that I use are GovTrack. So GovTrack, GovTrack, I think .org is a place where you can log in. It's free, create an account, and you can follow any piece of legislation. So, for example, I put in Every Kid Outdoors, and I can see the bill. I can see who's co-sponsoring the bill. I can see its chances of moving or passage. I can see, committee, where it's if it's been referred to a committee. I can see all that information, and I can also create an alert. I do a lot of creation of alerts because I don't have time or I don't remember to go back and check websites. So I have an alert, and anytime there's any update of status to that bill, I get an email notification that says, oh, this person, this member of Congress just co-sponsored the bill. So that's one place for specific legislation. Another place that we'll be tracking, Oak will be tracking Every Kid Outdoors, and that's one of our top policy priorities. So subscribing to our newsletter, I have on the bottom of the slide our website. You can find our a tab that says News and Views and find our newsletter. Subscribing to that newsletter would be one way to stay on top of some of the federal policy related to getting kids outdoors. And then the other thing that again, with alerts is Google Alerts has a great system too. So if there's something very specific that you're following and you want to see if there's news on it, you can always create alerts in Google too. Children Nature Network has a great newsletter. I'm trying to think if there's others out there. I'm sure TYO does too. That's really aggregating a lot of the information for the field and sharing it.
Thank you. Let's see. Children Nature Network actually does a really good job of aggregating.
Yeah.
As well as some of the other regional organizations that you mentioned. On that note, so you sort of talked about Oak. How do organizations become a member of Oak?
So organizations can become a member of Oak by visiting our website. On there, you'll see an About Us tab and a Join Oak tab. But basically, you'll fill out an application. We have a lot of questions. We want to make sure that the organizations are committed to Oak's mission and vision, and so we'll really want you to spend a little bit of time learning a little bit more about us. We're happy to have a call. Brenna Muller, she's listening in right now, but she's our Oak program manager and is available to talk to anybody one-on-one who's interested in learning more about Oak. But really, it's, fill out an application, and unless there's some, egregious reason why we don't think that you are committed to getting kids outdoors, then you can become a member of Oak. We do have a nominal fee to help us keep the lights on. I want to make sure people know that we do ask for our members to contribute $100 a year, and that money helps to staff our coordinator position and to make sure that we're able to bring you great content and share a newsletter and all of that. But it's pretty simple, and we're really open and want to be a space for the whole community.
Great, thanks, Jackie. Another question, do you have resources or direct strategies for empowering high school students on advocacy?
That's a good question. I don't have any specific resources to share with you. What I would say is that we have done a lot of that here at the Sierra Club. One thing that I didn't talk much about today was our youth outdoors program. So we reach, Sierra Club gets kids outdoors, high school kids, young kids, military families, veterans. We have a large outings program, and every once in a while we'll bring a group in of high school students to meet with their members of Congress. And so we'll do a little bit of the training, and a lot of that training is focused on really empowering young people to know that these members of Congress, these decision makers, work for them, and that they're excited to hear from them, and you know, so I don't have a, sorry, I don't have a direct resource, but I'm sure they're out there. You know, there's, yeah, I don't have a direct resource that I can link to, but I can, let me think a little bit about it and see if I can send something in the notes.
Thank you. Are there any other questions out there? We have just a couple more minutes before we are going to wrap up. So if you have any other questions for Jackie, please send them through. In the meantime, Jackie, thank you so much for this presentation today and helping us all have a better understanding of not only the work you do, but just sort of advocacy in general and the impact it can have with kids and getting them outdoors. Yeah, it looks like we're done with, it looks like there's no more questions coming through, so we'll give everyone a few minutes back of their day. Jackie, do you have anything else that you want to wrap up with? Oh no, I think we lost her again. Looks like we may have lost Jackie's audio there right at the end, but I want to thank everybody for joining us today. A recording of the webinar will be sent out to everybody. It'll also be available on TYO. If you're not a member of TYO, I encourage you to do so. As we mentioned just now in the Q&A, there's a lot of really great resources in general about getting youth outdoors that can be found there. That's mytyo.org. And we hope to see you there as well and in future webinars. Thank you so much for joining us today. Have a great day, everybody.